Hello and welcome to Designing Your Life Live with Bill Burnett and today's special guest, Chris Borland. Now, this is a fascinating dialogue you do not want to miss. Chris and Bill both inspire me a lot, but Chris did something that I don't know that many of us could do. And I want to not spoil the story too much, but let's just put it this way. He had the courage to step away from a killer career in the NFL because he's concerned more about his brain than about the money. And I think that is incredible. CTE in the NFL is a hot conversation. We're going to be talking about science. We're going to be talking about life design. And we're going to be talking about how Chris leveraged designing your life to reframe some of his thinking and build the life that he currently leads now. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to someone you probably already know. Bill Burnett, just say hello to everyone for us real quick.
Hi, everybody.
And here's Chris to warm us up. So, Chris, first of all, thank you so much for being here with us. It's fantastic to have you on the show. I'm curious, you had a wicked problem, and that's exactly how the book starts out. I can imagine a lot was running through your head as you were considering what to do with your career. Can you set the stage for the audience a little bit, where you were, what team you were on, what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Savannah and Bill, for conversation. I was an All-American linebacker at the University of Wisconsin and was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year in 2013. Was then drafted in the third round by the 49ers. And my career kind of was laid out before me. Was really thrilled to fulfill a dream. I always wanted to play in the NFL and be able to have it not only come true, but then to experience in San Francisco. I wound up starting the last 8 games of the year and led the team in tackles, named to the all-rookie team and a few other honors. But all the while, I was looking into the darker side of football. Prior to the season, I'd been concussed and was just thinking it's a wicked problem. Brain injury and repetitive brain trauma is inextricable from football. That concussion changed my thinking and made me wonder would be if I were to fulfill my goal over a decade and during the NFL. I think like many people who are kind of stuck in their life or haven't done life design, they may be willfully ignorant and haven't pursued different ways of thinking or different approaches. And I take responsibility for not looking into the issue earlier. Throughout college, it was just singularly focused on my goals and my career. But that moment before the season thinking led me to look into the brain injury in football. Ultimately, I decided to walk away after just my rookie year, which I think caught a lot of people by surprise. But if you're familiar with the science, it's a practical decision. Thank you for calling it brave, but I really just think it's pragmatic.
Well, I think that's also just a testament to your character. I mean, you found a truth and owned a truth that I think not many people have the courage to see at this stage. And I think that's truly remarkable. One of the things that is I've thought a lot about, and I'm curious actually, Bill, if you thought about this too. I mean, what you described was just a very fluid process of understanding science, making a decision based on your career, and it all seems really smooth. But you'd actually had a killer rookie year. You had won some awards. You walked away from what I believe is a $2.9 million contract, which is not a small amount of money. So while I do believe you made the right decision, very much so, and it was great, when were you the most stuck? When was it hardest? What was that moment like?
Well, thank you for the question, because it certainly wasn't as smooth as I made it sound. It was an excruciating year. There'd be weeks where I'd be, looking at players that took their own life by shooting themselves in the chest shortly after watching game film, preparing for that next opponent, and then to have to go out into the field and do what I had become familiar with scientifically, where the biomechanics of the injury, chemicals when you hit. I mean, I just as I was playing, so was really kind of a strange place to go and get motivated. I think the moment I felt the most stuck, I had an injury towards the end of my rookie year and was out for our final 2 games. I had looked into this, and I think by December of my rookie year, thought rather than try to play for 10 years or try to be a Hall of Famer, I may play just 5 or 3 years. And then coming to grips with the reality of my position and my goals inside and outside of the game, really from December on through when I informed the 49ers in March of 2015, that was hard. I mean, I was truly deeply stuck. I went back to my hometown, talked to all my family, and just couldn't do what I needed to do. But to actually make the call and end a dream was really, really challenging. So I think the most stuck.
Yeah. So
let
me jump in here. Chris, sure. Again, it is an extraordinary story, and I know you know that. And it is essentially a role model for other people trying to make really difficult decisions. I've been all around the country and talking with people about designing your life and doing book tours. And I run into a lot of people who are very, kind of your paradigm of the situation, very successful, doing exactly what I said I wanted to do. And making money, and it's a prestigious thing, and everybody's telling you, wow, you're so lucky. And these are people, unfortunately, who are in their late 40s or, middle of their career. And they're a big attorney at the law firm, or they're a big, they're a partner in a big consulting firm, or they're an investment banker. They didn't, you mentioned willful ignorance. They kind of ignored the fact that they hated their job all the way along, because it's just that sort of thing like, well, I'll just play for 3 more years, or I'll just wait until I make partner, or I'll just wait until, I make some accomplishment. And, the science on success tells us money won't make you happy, prestige won't make you happy, but people don't make those hard decisions, and one of the things I'm hoping for is, like, people read a book in their 20s and not wait until their 40s to figure out that it's not a good fit. And you were faced with a pretty big decision as a young, a reasonably young man, and you were able to not only understand the science but take action on it. So, I'm sure it was hard, but I'm just curious. You were playing. You were playing in Wisconsin. Big football program there. You knew about the possibility of brain injury for a long time. How did you rationalize it through college and through your first year? What was your thinking there? Because I think it's important for people to understand. We don't just suddenly make these decisions. It's a process.
No, you're right. It's absolutely an evolution. And I wasn't entirely ignorant of the issue. The first case of CTE is a Wisconsin alum, Mike Webster.
Yeah. Wow.
I think, the way I'd rationalize it, he's the only former Wisconsin player to be in the Hall of Fame, so his plaque sits outside of our locker room. I think in college, the way I rationalized it was players that you'd seen the tragic stories of were really outliers. Mike Webster, and my junior year, Junior Seau took his life. Those guys played for 16 and 20 years respectively. Mike, it's been well documented, took steroids and abused some prescription painkillers. So, from 18 to 22, I was thinking, not going to play for 20 years, and certainly not going to take steroids or drink heavily throughout my career. Those guys as outliers. And if you set out when you were hurt and yourself that you could play long and be healthy. Mm-hmm. I'd come to learn once I really looked at the middle ground of players that don't necessarily and struggle. Also, there's a lot of realization. I think also I did some rationalization because it was a dream, and that there could be some tragic consequences. Would have been hard to come to grips with when I was 20. So I think I lied to myself a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think that's how people find themselves, 40 in a job they don't like, and now the consequences are I've got a wife and kids and a family and partners and families and mortgages, and then they really do feel stuck. So I think having the insight to make a decision when you were still healthy and could make that decision was great. I'm wondering, you mentioned you went back and talked to your family and stuff, and you talked to the team about it. What was the team's reaction? What was the 49ers reaction? Like I would imagine they'd be like, "What are you, crazy? Like you've been our best."
Well, you mentioned
rookie of the whole year. You're our best pick. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, there was some of that, of course. I think just to backtrack a second, you said, I mentioned I went back and talked to my family. One challenge with my decision was there's a certain degree of adulation for players. I mean, you're popular, some guys are famous, and people are along for the ride. So you're really not just changing your career, you're also lives of those close to you. That's something that I wasn't really privy to. The more I talked to my family and close friends, it was almost hard for them to come to grips with, just because they love football and they love watching me play. But it was, clearly the best decision for in terms of what the 49ers, great. They asked if I wanted to talk to more people. Stanford does research on it. Brain injury. At that point, I had just done leg work and talked to so many people that made up, and I wanted to hopefully get out ahead of free agency and the draft so the Niners could find my replacement. But one thing I think people would be surprised, and you may have experienced this talking to other people at high levels of professions that lead internally, there was understanding. So active former players agree. I think they understand on a certain level, if not viscerally. I mean, these are guys who've done it. The incredulity would be a fan. They would be the people that I can't believe doing. Some of that within the game, but also kind of a nod of I get it, bro.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic that they would support you, and I think that's true. I mean, for some reason, I've talked to lots of unhappy, mid-career lawyers, and when they actually decide to do something else, all their lawyer friends go, "Good for you," good for you. And I'm not happy either, but good for you. And so, I mean, it's great to get that support. But you pointed out, and I think it's interesting. It's not just your dream; it's a lot of people's dreams that you would be in the NFL. It was an identity that you had built over all these years. And I think that's the sort of maybe deeper life design question is my identity really my job or this thing that I'm really good at? Or is my identity something, deeper? And you will probably in a lot of bios and a lot of times when people introduce you, they'll say former NFL, player. And you're like, when are you going to stop saying that? How are you handling this identity change?
Well, there's a cliche in athletics is that athletes live two lives: athlete and former athlete. And I had to just come to grips with that. I think you're exactly right. For the rest of my life, it'll probably be former NFL player. Short of, colonizing Mars. That might be the first title. We love football that much in America. So It's okay. I think I can, for a while, it really bothered me. I wanted to redefine myself, and perhaps at a young age, and still, I just turned 27, a little ignorant of the fact of just the power of those three letters. So I think it can be good, and I'm not ashamed of playing. I'm so glad I played. I'm proud of my accomplishments, and then I can use the success and connections within that realm to redefine myself. So it's not going anywhere, but I've learned to lean into it and be proud of it.
Well, and the positive part is I think it does give you a platform to talk about this issue. It's a really important issue, particularly, when we're talking about young kids in high school or Pop Warner football and kids playing, at D3 teams that aren't going to the NFL. They're just playing for the fun of the game, and if we don't get a little bit more awareness of how to make the game safe, it's really not okay, right?
Yeah, and there's been tremendous progress over the past 2 years. It's something I couldn't have been prepared for as such an activist. But because wonderful things are going on through the Concussion Legacy Foundation and a few other organizations. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Illinois on a bill proposed to ban youth tackle football. I think just 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, that would have been considered absurd. And the bill passed committee, so it'll be heard on the floor. I know people probably fall on all ends of the spectrum with an issue like that. I think sports are for us, not the other way around. So retooling a youth tackle game into a flag until high school, huge progress. Millions of children will play, and in the decades that follow, if we don't of millions, we'll play tackle football live. So I think speaking out, it's not all that NFL moniker. I don't think it's going anywhere. So I'm happy to use my my platform.
Well, yeah, and then I know you've got a couple of projects you're working on now. We'll get to in a second, but I'm curious because we found out that in an interview you had done that you had mentioned, and I was using some ideas from this book, Designing Your Life. How did you find out about the DYL stuff?
Well, I first heard of it on Thought Leaders series at Stanford. I heard Dave Evans' interview, and just picked up the book. I just moved out to LA projects, and I read the book right after Dave's interview. It was refreshing to me because I kind of, past 2.5 years, it's what I'd been doing, but not so structured and full and proactive. Every branch down on the Designing Your Life tree. It would have been nice for me to have this book fresh out of the NFL. I love the positive tilt of it. For the past couple of months, I've been following along, keeping track of my health, work, play, and love percentages, as the book suggests. It's a great way to check back in. I'm someone who has a tendency to dive deeply into something I'm into, whether it's work, health, love, play. To strike balance there, the tilt towards the positive, it's been a great exercise for me just to structure my life in a flexible way, not be so rigid and not dive as deeply into things and lose sight of what's important.
Yeah, we hope it's a positive, message. Design is inherently a positive idea. We're always trying to design things to make them better. And we just wanted to, come up with a bunch of ideas and tools that people could use. And you mentioned, the work, health, play dashboard. And that gets people out of this false dichotomy of, work, it's either work or life. Do I have life or do I have work? Which is a problem you just can't solve. So the other, other big idea in there is you can prototype stuff. Just try things. Have you been able to, prototype some of your ideas for what's next?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the falling down the awkwardly. We ran a study last year at the Center for Healthy Minds in Madison. There's a researcher named Richie Davidson, who was one of the first people to image what meditation does to your brain physiologically. So Richie put in Tibetan monks into fMRI machines, actually saw what the practice of meditation did to their brains. So they've produced a tremendous amount of research about the positive effects. And I approached Richie shortly after football and asked if there's something he could do for former players. We were able to get it done. So in just a year and a half, and formed and had 17 former NFL players go through an 8-week pilot program, a first of its kind. I was a little apprehensive. Guys from rural Wisconsin, there was some barbed wire tattoos, guys who like to hunt. I didn't know how they would take to meditation. And successful. I kind of had the idea, if it were, I'd use it as a proof to start my own company doing the same work. There's been other projects going on, but I'm finally getting that off the ground. So we're going to do curriculum we did with the center and get it into active populations, because I think meditation is a tool that's applicable to anyone, but particularly athletes. I think we're accustomed to practicing something on a daily basis, to working and getting and it's a great time to be involved in this space.
Just real quick here, guys. This is getting fantastic, and I just want to thank our viewers online right now. Hello, Gabby, if you're one of our fabulous fans tuning in either live right now or to the replay. We'd love to answer your questions and say hello. Let us where you're tuning in from, and also let us know if you have any questions for Chris or for Bill. I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I think we're talking about something really interesting here, and I want to just further emphasize the point. So you were a high-performance athlete who found the DYL message resonating with him. And you really specifically, if I recall, resonated with the concept of building your way forward and prototyping to move forward. Can you specifically talk about that a little bit more? Because I think high-performance athletes as well as high-performance individuals can really resonate with this attitude. So I'm curious for your take.
Yeah, well, in the football, so regimented. I mean, I could tell you where I was if you just give me a date while I was playing. And so the word I heard a lot used in transitioning out of high-level sports is that it's a profound disequilibrium. It's wonderful to have all this freedom that young people with a lot of money find themselves having. That'd be a little aim. And I know I'm aimless. Like, what am I going to do? And then I would kind of oscillate between aimlessness and feeling trapped as this advocate. Building your way forward, easily did myself, kind of liberated, feeling like I don't have something specific to do. And also it freed me from that position where I felt painted into a corner as an advocate or a flag bearer for something that I never intended to champion. I can say too is that it just opens so many more possibilities. I built my way forward with meditation. I reached out to Richie, thinking, hoping, maybe a 20% chance we could get something done. It happened, and that's just bled into new avenues. And I couldn't have possibly thought that as a history major and football player that wanted to go to law school or coach, that I'd be working in meditation. I know Dave in his interview with ET, graduates aren't doing what they majored in 10 years later. Football I majored in, and either is meditation or psychology. But every time I reach out and try something new, I learn something. I've failed a few times and have to take a huge slice of humble pie, particularly, if you leave the NFL, people assume you're John Urschel and you're going to get your PhD at MIT in mathematics. My path has been more circuitous and but redemptive and informative and interesting. So I think building your way forward is the only way.
Yeah, I think that's great. Could you, not to drill down here, but could you give us some examples of how you specifically did? Because to be honest, your first step from the NFL to me was a very large piece of humble pie that I'm incredibly impressed by. So can you actually specifically outline those kind of first few steps that got you where you are now?
Oh, wow. Right when I quit, I didn't think it would be, and this seems stupid looking back, I didn't think it'd be a huge story. There are guys who'd made similar decisions, maybe not guys who had the immediate success or were in line to start again following, but right away I was thrown into this role of mental health and advocacy for the issue specifically. So that first step was a act that wasn't really my choice, but I had to lean into it a great deal really fast. So I think the first thing that I'm glad I did is improve, not return calls or emails or went somewhere else or did needed to do, go back to school or start a job. But there were people from this mental health space, from the advocacy space, and fielding those calls partly out of a sense of who've suffered. First step for me, and learned a lot. I think the first really did outside of general advocacy, an internship at the Carter Center. President Carter and Mrs. Carter have been working in the mental health space since President Carter of Georgia. So that was the first I've done substantively where I deeply advocacy, public awareness, how it's covered journalistically. And that to me was the first decision I'd made to really take action in that space, and learned a great deal.
And again, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, so again, one of the things I always find so compelling about you, and it's clear that you are someone who meditates and practices mindfulness, because I really hope the audience can feel your calm. You have just had this general even keel. Was there any step in your process that you just hated, that just wasn't a fit? Was there something that you tried after the NFL that was just not for you?
Oh, yeah. I just mentioned the time at the Carter Center, which was wonderful. I don't know if it's my nature to work a 9 to 5. I don't know if I can sit at a desk and do paperwork all day. I like to be active. I like to, as an athlete, so obviously I like to play sports. And for me, I need to be out in the community. So that was something that, while it was a wonderful experience, I thought, I'm really glad I did this, and I'm going to learn or take what I learned and apply it to something a little different. So I'd say that the lesson.
Yeah, just to jump in. I think obviously one of the reasons people were so interested in the story is that you had been so successful. You had a great rookie year, right? I mean, if you hadn't played, if you had walked on and not played a couple of years and then decided to quit, it's still an important story. It's an important story, individual story, but you kind of represent this, iconic, I made it to the NFL. I had a great rookie year. And had that continued on that way, had you decided to continue doing that, most likely you would have had tremendous success in a thing that very, very few people get an opportunity to experience. And so, then you're thrown into the role of an advocate, sort of accidentally, like, I'm just doing the thing that's right for me. I'm not telling everybody else what to do. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants you to do something. And I think it is interesting that you go from a big contract in the NFL to an intern at the Carter Center. That's great, because, the whole idea of the book and the whole idea of the class is, do what's available. Do what you're curious about. Don't worry about whether people think it's a good idea or a bad idea. When we do the workshops and we have people do their wild card plan, I say, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about what people would think? Because so much of, I think, people's identity is wrapped up in, well, what will other people say? Do I have a good job, a prestigious job, and I'm making lots of money? And people will say, oh, I'm so lucky. And you were able to, maybe either because of your mindfulness practice, you were able to just sort of check in with yourself and go, hey, none of that's important. I'm going to follow my curiosity and see what comes up, and I'm going to try to avoid. I mean, there's also the stereotype of the ex-NFL athlete. Okay, let's see, you can be a car dealer, you can be a car dealer like John Elway and then buy a team. You can be a sportscaster, and talk about your days in the NFL. It's like there's all these sort of stereotypes, and you're not falling into any of those categories. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the cliche of 2 lives, 1 athlete and 2 former athletes. And so I know in the book you reference, excuse me, is the audio doing okay?
We got a little echo on you.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, that's better. We talked about living 2 lives as an athlete, and you mentioned in designing your life that there's a multiverse. So there's an infinite amount of possibilities of who you can be and what you can do. Right. I knew in leaving the game that one thing about being a former player, the reality is at the top of you rub shoulders with a lot of influential and interesting people. You may a lot of former players enter the workforce at 30, 35, qualified for an entry-level position. I think psychologically that's really to come to terms with. You go from being someone, not qualified for an entry-level position. I was a little higher when I embraced the role of working in mental health that I needed to start from the ground up. So it's what I was in. It's important, particularly in masculine in athletics, outside of athletics, with the epidemic of veteran suicides is nothing short of tragic. And to be a small voice in that world means a lot to me, more so than selling cars or owning a team. But I needed to do it right. I think I could have, traveled and spoke, but and I still building it from the ground up, doing it the right way. I think is the long play, and for whatever's next.
Yeah, and you mentioned your project with the University of Wisconsin, the Center for Healthy Minds, which is fantastic, and that's both contributing to research on the subject and trying to understand how people could use mindfulness in a positive way. You're also working with this group that came out of Google originally, the Search Inside Yourself guys or folks. There was a person at Google, I think, named Ming, who's legendary now.
That's
for this,
right. That's right.
Bringing sort of a little bit of neuroscience and mindfulness into the practice. And it's a thing that started at Google. You want to talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Or the work you're doing with.
Yeah. Around the same time I was doing the work with I was brainstorming of ways to mindfulness into athletics. The practice, and deservedly so, of being ephemeral, something that tourists would take to. I would say save silly search from Google. Mang's approach with his books and with their programs is so direct. It's data driven to a certain degree. And like designing your life, it's tilted towards the positive. So it's not dry. It's not ephemeral. It's practical. You can do it right away. And like I've said before, I think athletes are natural meditators. So what I'm doing now with Search Inside Yourself is we're getting their curriculum into athletic departments. They've worked before with companies, and I'm also getting certified as a teacher in their curriculum myself, so I can do groundwork. I'd like to really do it myself in addition to partnering with them and getting them involved with schools. So it's a wonderful program. Mang, I don't know if you've met him or seen any of his talks, but he's if you just watch him for 5 minutes, you're sold on what the practice can do. He went from a tortured engineer to I think his job title at Google was the Jolly Good Fellow.
Yeah.
So he's probably a case study in designing your life as well.
Well, that'd be fun to talk with him at some point. I have seen some of the videos, and he seems like a really fun guy. I'm sure you get asked the next question a bunch of times. If I'm a parent and my kid wants to play football, in junior high or high school or Pop Warner or whatever, and I grew up in Wisconsin or Texas or someplace where football is big. What's your advice to those parents? Should they be concerned? What should they be thinking about?
Well, I think a healthy amount of concern is sometimes swings too far in the other direction.
Right.
There's lots of people who are healthy. I think one thing that everyone should absolutely do is wait until high school. There's a number of prominent former prees to Josh Cribbs to Mike Ditka who advocate waiting until high school. That to me makes perfect sense. 95% of people ads won't play beyond the contact to 3 or 4 years, 12 or 13. Acting CTE are greatly, they go down greatly. So I'd proceed with caution. I don't think I'll have my kids play, but I'm from the Rust Belt, West Ohio. I understand completely how important football is to communities. And I think we can have our cake and eat it too if you just wait.
We have at Stanford, we have lots and lots of really amazing athletes. We win the Sears Trophy every year for the best athletic program in the NC2A. And the students are some of my favorite students. I mean, they're all, even if they're an engineering major, Andrew Luck was a architecture major. They take hard classes and they go to school and they play ball or soccer or gymnastics or whatever. But the thing that sets them apart from other students, and Stanford students are pretty hardworking in general, is just their ability to organize their time, to set goals and accomplish them, and to work on teams. So I hope in the whole conversation about potential dangers of CTE and concussions and stuff, we don't lose the importance of playing team sports and learning how to be set goals and accomplish them, and learning how to be a team player and work for something larger than yourself. If you look at a lot of the research on what makes a life purposeful, it's about being on a team, doing something bigger than yourself, accomplishing things where you thought were a little outside of your reach. And sports teaches kids how to be that person.
Yeah, I think sports. Most CEOs were high school athletes, and I know it in so many ways, myself included. I think it's as simple as retooling the youth game to flag is a wonderful game. You can glean all the same lessons as you can in tackle. So that measure, I think, to me, how we achieve this, improve the likelihood you don't have damage, and also still get to play the game you love, be a member of something that's bigger than yourself, learn to be on time and get great exercise. So I think the solution's there. They've done it in other sports. Youth hockey eliminated checking at certain ages. Yeah. Youth soccer's eliminated heading at certain ages. So like I said before, these games are for us, not the other way around, and we can rework them. They created the forward pass about 100 years ago. Maybe it's time to create the flag league for all you.
Yeah, exactly. My son played hockey and in the league before checking, and then a little bit after. And my daughters played soccer. Just very simple changes make the game so much safer. And they don't take away from the lessons that are being learned. Sometimes I think parents lose sight of why you play sports as a kid. So maybe someday you end up like you go to the NFL, but mostly you play sports to learn sportsmanship and the things we've been talking about.
I feel so.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say I agree. I can agree completely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's one of my favorite ads of all time. I was a NCAA athlete as well as a high school athlete, and I'll never forget seeing this ad. And it was great epic B-roll of awesome achievements, buzzer-beating baskets, Hail Mary passes. and then it's 99.99% of us are going pro in something else. And I thought it was just a great reminder that really isn't the fate. I want to take a moment. You guys are doing so great. I just want to make sure we include our audience here. We've got a few questions and a couple awesome things. So I just want to, Mari is a great community member, and she says that it is great to be reminded to keeping DYL and its application in various situations. So I think this is a unique one. We haven't talked about the application of DYL and high performance athletics and athletes in general. So Chris, thank you so much for being the voice of this. It's clear our community is loving that. We have a question, actually it's kind of a combo question for both of you, from Catherine. She says, Chris, it was really interesting that you pointed out the positive in the book and the life design method. Bill, you mentioned flourish in your book. What influence did positive psychology have on the designing your life method?
The positive psych guides are vitally important to us. So really, if you look at all of the book and the ideas and the tools in the book, it's based on design thinking, which is this innovation methodology, which starts with empathy and ends up with prototyping. But a lot of the ways in which we, kind of organized things were based on what we had learned from Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and Dan Goleman, the emotional intelligence guys. I mean, we were looking for, what does science tell us about a meaningful life and a life that's, that people view as valuable? And, 20 years ago or something, when Martin Seligman got together and said, hey, let's start doing psychology, the psychology of healthy people. What makes healthy people happy? What makes healthy people thrive? Because up until that point, psychology had mostly been dealing with, what makes people crazy or depressed, or how do we deal with the psychosis of the human mind rather than the flourishing. And so, we've drawn heavily from their research and tried to make stuff that people could understand, because it's not always easy to understand. And then a lot of our tools, our exercises, or the Chris mentioned work, love, health, play, that's actually sort of a derivative in some ways of Martin Seligman's idea of PERMA. PERMA was a term he invented that just each letter means something, and I can never remember what they all mean. But it was a way of assessing, your life for meaning. It had 7 things in it, and I can't remember 7, so we just did 4. But we also looked at the other work around flow from Csikszentmihalyi and what is emotional intelligence from Dan Goleman. So we at Stanford, a research university, you can't just make stuff up. It has to be based on some kind of science, like the science that Chris was talking about around brain injury. As we learn more and more about what makes a healthy, happy, meaningful human life, we just keep building more and more tools into our method.
Great. Awesome. Go for it. Please do.
I just wanted to say that the work of Dan Goleman and Richie and others fits so perfectly with design thinking, because baked into iterating is failing. And if you don't have the emotional resiliency to understand that it's not personal, you just it's part of the process. Right. It'd be hard to do design thinking. I think it goes to mindfulness and it's just the nature of things. Yeah,
and they probably don't identify themselves as positive psychologists, but Angela Duckworth's work on grit, and we had a chance to co-present with Angela, and she's amazing. And then the work that Carol Dweck here at Stanford's done on growth mindset also, contribute to this notion of, I think the athletes I know who are the kind of students that I just love, they'll work very hard at something and not be any good at it at all when they start. But through practice and repetition and commitment and grit, they turn out to be, Olympic athletes or whatever. So it is all, design thinking is the underlying, skeleton that we hang everything off of. But the positive psych people are super important to our work.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that's really great too. I think this notion of practice and that coming from athletics, coming from mindfulness, coming from DYL, it's practice and prototyping are very similar things. You're experimenting until you get to a place where you're comfortable with something. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Another question, and I kind of want to split this out into two questions. So we've definitely got some Bay Area fans in the house. And so Charlie says, I know the Niners were supportive, but was there any discreet or secret pushback from the NFL or league that you've experienced immediately or further on? And I'll let you answer this, but then I have an immediate follow-up to this. So was there any secret negative vibes maybe that we wouldn't know about publicly?
You're going to feed my paranoia, Charlie. I don't know. No, I don't think there's been anything overtly, they're coming after me or anything like that. Certainly the messaging, they want to control the messaging, but no, it's been fair. It's been fair.
They would probably prefer you weren't talking about this because they haven't up until recently. They haven't been all that upfront about the problem.
No, but to their credit, there's been improvements. So onward.
Good. Well, and so my immediate follow-up, and I'm actually really glad, we're not here to feed your paranoia. I'm very glad to hear that your wise decision was received with acceptance. I would love to hear your advice, your kind of one-liner nugget, if you've got it handy, for someone who's sitting in our audience, perhaps, or is watching this replay and is thinking about making a big decision like you made, where some people would, like you mentioned earlier in the interview, say, oh my gosh, you're crazy. What are you doing? What would you tell that person today? What's it like on the other side?
What allowed me to make the decision, as hard as it was a strong sense of identity. And however you come to that, I knew I wasn't my career. And I don't think a lot of people feel that way. I empathize with the reasons they may feel that way, supporting family and other things, but there's so much you can do, and you're not the noun that follows your name. You're not the doctor or, Ann Carpenter nurse. You're a person, and the possibilities are limitless. So I think getting in touch with really who you are to your profession. I don't know how actionable that advice is, but genuinely that's the way I always viewed playing football. I'm not a football player. I'm a man that plays football, and I think that to transition.
I think that's perfect, though, and I think what you said is very important, and I think this happens to us at any stage in our life, but I can tell you from talking to the community how often you can always tell someone who introduces themselves first by their career versus say where they're from or what they're interested in or whatever it is in a social situation. And I think it's really important, and I just want to re-emphasize what you just said. If you're out there and you're worried that you're defined by your career, you're not. I promise the people who love you don't just love you because of where you work. And you can make a decision just like Chris, which is really, really compelling. I just want to give a quick shout out to Margaret in our audience. She is excited about the prospect of using DYL with veterans with PTSD. We have a few folks in the community also very passionate about this space, so it's really nice to hear that that's something that you're working with as well, Chris. We appreciate that work. We are coming towards the end of the hour here. So, Bill, I don't know if I have a closer for Chris, but I don't know if you have a last question.
It's unfair to ask you all the questions, and people, always want office hours with the guys who wrote the book. And I'm wondering if is there anything I could help you with, or any question that you have about something in the book or something that you're trying, that maybe we've seen before. We might have something helpful.
Yeah, I don't have a question personally, but I have a question about designing your life and the seminars you put on. What is a space you're yet to work in, or a group of people you're yet to work with that you're excited to introduce designing your life? Well,
I'll tell two things, and one does relate to athletes. we were just asked to do a workshop for the returning Olympic athletes. So the U.S. Olympic Committee has a group that is specifically dedicated to Olympic athletes who are retiring. Now, I mean, you could be a 20-year-old speed skater and you're done, right? You could be a skier or a luger or something. For this one, it's going to be in April. It's the winter athletes. And, there's no pro league for speed skating or any of this stuff. And maybe you started doing this when you were 5, or you were a figure skater at 5 and you did high school through a GED program and you've never been to college and now you're 21, you've got your gold medal at the Olympics and you're done. So you talk about an identity shift, right? So Dave's going to go out and do a 2-hour workshop with those guys and then about 4 hours of individual work. And we're really curious to see if we could be useful there and helpful there. And then the other place that we get asked I mean, I think it's going to be fast. I can't go because I'm teaching that week, but it'll be a fascinating experience and we'll learn a lot. All these things for us are like more empathy, more need finding, figure out, how to be useful. The one we get asked for a lot is high school kids. High school kids, are also, in this point where they're trying to figure out, do I want to go to college? I want to go to vocational school. What do I want to do? My parents are telling me all these things. I don't know. And we're starting to think about, how we could help there. It's a little different because the parent is part of the conversation. Everything in designing your life is really about how you assess and become aware of what you want. It's a little different for high school kids. And then the other one, I have the great privilege here of teaching at Stanford, and it's a wonderful school, but it is an elite school. 80% of the kids are on financial aid. It's not a school of rich kids necessarily, but it's an elite school. Okay. And it's small. It's only 15,000 students. The community college system in just California alone is 400,000 students. And these are first gen to go to college. These are kids that don't come from any village typically. And just are working really hard, to improve themselves. And we've been doing some workshops with school administrators and professors in the community college system, trying to transfer this work down to there. And I'm really excited about that because that could have such a big impact on people who could really significantly give them a bunch of options for what they end up doing, after even a 2-year degree and get their an administrative degree or go on to a 4-year college and, maybe finish a full college degree. But I don't think this process has anything to do with where you went to school or whether you even go to college. You need networks and you need ideas and you need to figure out what's next. And the world of work is changing so fast that you got to be good at this. Because even if you find something you like, it might go away. When the robots come and everything is done by AI, you're going to need a new career. So you want to get good at designing your life.
I love it. It's needed in all those populations. I'm so happy to hear you're doing the work.
Yeah, if we do, I'd love to be able to call you back after we've talked to the Olympic athletes and talked to the committee because they're serious about helping those that their athletes transition out of that. And it's the same thing. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. It's like you will always be, Joe, the guy who was an Olympic athlete, or you will always be the silver medal winner, blah, blah, blah. And you'll never be able to, probably match that accomplishment in some ways. And then what do you do? Particularly if you did spend your entire life becoming that speed skater. Now what?
It's so important that the transition, some athletes never successfully transition out of the sport.
Yeah. Maybe we'll bring you back to
the population.
You can do the mindfulness part of the workshop, and we'll bring you back as a high performance athlete consultant.
They pair perfectly. Let's do it.
Okay.
I love it. Nice little hustle there at the Ag Bill.
I'm recruiting it.
A+ job. I support this recruitment. I support this recruitment wholeheartedly. So my final question before we wrap this up, and I extend my extreme gratitude to you, Chris. Do you plan on continuing to design your life?
I will continue to design my life for the foreseeable future. It's a huge asset to me and to my career to family, to health, work. So thanks for writing the book, Bill and Dave. And absolutely, I'm definitely going to keep it up.
That is fantastic. I love it. Well, Chris Borland, thank you so much for joining us today, Bill Burnett as well. And to all of our fabulous community members, thank you for tuning in to this edition of Designing Your Life Live. We are back for the new season, and we'll be giving you 6 episodes. This is the first of those. My name is Savannah Peterson. I am your beloved Designing Your Life community manager, and it is a pleasure to be here with you all. Remember that sharing is caring, and that we do read the comments during the replays. So if you watch this not live, that's totally cool. We'll come through and answer any questions you may have. Hopefully we can convince Chris to do more with us. And in the meantime, happy life designing.